Good day, my fellow nerds. Welcome to Quick Book Reads, the podcast where we explore the many meanings of great books. I'm your exciting host, Amir, and today we're diving into James Baldwin's revolutionary novel, Another Country. Now, Another Country, what a title, right? The title refers to a sense of travel and suspense, right? But what exactly is this other country Baldwin wants us to think about? Is there a place, a state of mind, a metaphor, or all of the above? Over the next few minutes, we will journey through the story and try to unpack what Baldwin might have meant by another country. So here's a little background about the book. Another Country was published in 1962 by a writer and civil rights activist called James Baldwin, if you didn't know by now. He started working on it a few years earlier at around 1959 in Paris and eventually finished it in Istanbul. Now, I mention this information because those locations where he wrote the novel weren't just vacations for him. For Baldwin, they really shaped the emotional landscape of the novel. The story happens in New York, especially in Harlem and Greenwich Village. It follows a group of friends, and their lives change a lot after one of them, Rufus Scott, dies by suicide. Now, Rufus is a black jazz musician. He carries a lot because he feels the weight of racism and poverty. Basically, he feels like he does not fit in, and his death affects everyone around him. Baldwin presents a messy and painful, honest novel. In it, we observe interracial relationships, queer feelings, and insecurity. The characters deeply search for meaning and connection. A quiet, persistent feeling of displacement stays below everything. Someone is somewhere but never really at home. That's really where the title Another Country starts to take shape. Eric, a character from the book, leaves for France and finds a sense of freedom there regarding sexuality that he never experienced back home. His relationship with Wes, who is a young Frenchman, feels open in a way that his past relationships did not. And Baldwin, he knew that feeling firsthand. He lived much of his life in France too, not because of the wine, but because it gave him space. It was, for him and for Eric, another country, a place to breathe a little. But Baldwin didn't stop with geography. He pushed the idea further. Take Harlem. It's technically part of the US, but for many Black Americans, it might as well be a different world. A place that's both familiar and alienating. Rufus walks those streets, but he's not at peace, not with his country, community, or himself. His relationship with Leona, who is a white woman from the South, who's carrying her own trauma, spirals into something painful and violent. The world around them labels her as his whore, which he internalizes all of it until it eats away at him. Baldwin shows us a man crushed by the weight of a society that refuses to see him as a fully human. And when Rufus jumps from that bridge, it's not just an ending, it's his final attempt to escape, to leave the country he knows for a different one. One where maybe he could finally be free from systemic neglect and oppression he faced. For Rufus, Harlem offers no peace. He feels very deeply alienated from the white society already, but also from his own sense of self, or who he is, in other words. His relationship with Leona, a white Southern woman who is herself traumatized him, which leads him to become toxic and violent. Society sees her as his whore, and he internalizes these views until they eventually crush him. Baldwin shows Rufus as a man trapped in a country that doesn't recognize his individuality. Finally, when he leaps from the bridge, he is tragically trying to escape to reach another country where maybe he could finally be free. But even beyond physical places, Baldwin's title points to emotional and psychological exile. Most of the characters in another country don't feel at home, not even within themselves. Take Vivaldo, for example, an aspiring white writer. He's in love with Ida, who is Rufus's sister, but their interracial relationship is burdened by the invisible weights of prejudice, privilege, and guilt. Ida is confident in her black identity, yet deeply aware of how white people see her. Her relationship with Vivaldo ultimately falters, not because of a lack of love, but because the distance between their countries is too vast. See what I just did there? Then there's Eric, the openly bisexual actor. He has affairs with Rufus, Cass, Vivaldo, and later Wes. He is constantly moving between worlds, straight and gay, black and white, Europe and America. Each move reveals Baldwin's challenge to boundaries. Each love in this novel is a kind of transgression for that time period. These characters live in their own countries, and yet they all long for a connection, for a place where they can just be. The real tragedy is that they rarely find it. They are foreigners, not just in their society, but sometimes in their own hearts. Baldwin isn't trying to give us quick fixes or deliver a moral lesson. What he does instead is much more honest. He holds up a mirror and makes us look. He shows us the quiet, everyday ways the world builds invisible barriers between people, barriers made from something that makes someone stand out from what society sees as normal. It's hidden in plain sight. It is also important to note that Baldwin himself was a stranger to being a stranger. Catch it? Baldwin understood what it meant to live as an outsider. As he was a gay and black writer in America at that time, he found that freedom he couldn't here in places like Paris and Istanbul. So when Eric returns from France back home, it's not just an ordinary homecoming, it's a return to a country that may never truly accept him. In the end, another country becomes not just a title, but a question. What is home? What does it mean to belong? And how do we live in a nation that often feels foreign to us? As we near the end, James Baldwin gives us a novel that is raw and relentless, a book about the cost of silence and the fragile beauty of connection. In Rufus, Ida, Vivaldo, Eric, and all the others, we see people crossing borders, some literal, some metaphorical, in search of that elusive other country where they might finally be free. Thanks for joining me today on QBC at this time. I hope this insight into another country has made you think about your own borders and given you some things to retrospect. Until next time, nerds.